I think because I'd read somewhere that, the next thing that Yes will do is put the Bible to music, you know. And I thought, right, suckers, I'll show you. We can do it. It can be done.
It's March 1973. Jon Anderson is a guest at the wedding of his friend and ex-Yes drummer Bill Bruford. Also in attendance at this wedding is Jamie Muir, percussionist in Bruford's new band King Crimson. Anderson had watched Crimson play live and he was fascinated with Muir's on-stage presence. Anderson approached Muir at the wedding and explained to him that he was looking for ideas for the next Yes album. Muir instantly knew the answer to Jon's question, and after a brief disappearance returned with a copy of a book entitled Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. Anderson would have seen this book's author before, but without knowing it, as he features on the cover of the Sgt. Pepper album. One of the many Eastern gurus that were adopted by musicians and artists in the 1960s, Paramahansa Yogananda is credited with popularizing ancient Indian wisdom and the concepts of meditation, yoga and self-enlightenment to the West. It was whilst Yes were on tour in Japan that Anderson became engrossed with this book, with his attention being drawn to a passage that described 4 key Hindu Shastras. Shastras are scriptures that contain guidance and outline key beliefs within this ancient Indian religion. These 4 Shastras, the cornerstone of this ancient Indian religion, were to become key to the lyrical themes and the musical structure of the next Yes album. Let's try and examine them. The first of the Shastras is Shruti. Now this relates to divine messages that are directly heard or revealed from the gods to the higher authorities of Hinduism, namely the rishis. These are kind of ancient sages and yogis. The next Shastra is Smriti. This relates to things that are remembered by normal everyday people. These are often stories and interpretations by which the previous Shruti revelations are recalled and passed on to others. For some reason, this concept was misspelt on the Tales sleeve notes.
Stand on hills of long forgotten yesterdays. Pass amongst your memories, told returning way. We walk around the story.
Purana is literally the Sanskrit word for ancient, and this Shastra relates to a collection of ancient and sacred Hindu literature. These include myths about gods and their descendants and how man and the universe were created. The final Shastra is Tantra. This relates to rites and rituals, the freeing of energy and expanding the consciousness of the mind. Tantras relates to connections between mind, body and soul and beyond it. And it's through our actions, mantras and yoga and diet and ceremony that this connection is achieved. Perhaps how Topographic Oceans would have turned out had Anderson not met Jamie Muir is another question, but I imagine this theme of 4 would probably have remained. with possibly earth, water, fire and air being strong contenders for the thematic colours of each side. The title itself is a strange one, as the word topographic relates to the study of land features and mountains and so on, and not oceans and seas. The original title was meant to be Tales from the Topographic Ocean. This was one of Anderson's invented words, supposedly relating to a story called October the 1st is Too Late. The forthcoming album was advertised as Topographic Oceans as late as October, and Anderson can be heard introducing the album using this word in some November show dates, so the change in title must have come very late in proceedings. In one now famous all-night writing session on the 20th of April in Savannah, Georgia, Anderson and Howe mapped out the basic lyrical themes and melodies for what was originally one single piece of music. Subsequent concert reviews following this legendary writing session were less than favourable, and it confirms the often quoted reference that the night of writing Topographic left its writers exhausted for days afterwards. On entering ELP's Manticore rehearsal studios in London, it's thought that the single song idea had now developed into what John was calling 4 Close to the Edges. In an interview around the time, Wakeman described the new album as having interchangeable parts, the idea being that the band could rearrange what they were playing and either shorten it or lengthen the pieces based on the mood and response from the audience. He's unclear though how this would actually translate onto a vinyl record, but seems certain that they would find a way. Wakeman has also stated that on entering the rehearsal studio, the initial album tracks had lengths of 8, 12, 15 and 19 minutes. He is however unspecific as to which piece was which length. The band took a whole month off during these rehearsals, in which Anderson travelled to Morocco, where he wrote the lyrics. I often wonder how this young singer must have felt at this time, with the newly released Yes Songs album riding high in the charts. He must have beamed of confidence and limitless ambition. When Anderson returned, discussions over the recording location began. Both he and Wakeman voted for a country retreat or a forest with a huge tent and the electrical generators buried underground to reduce the noise. Howe and Squire, however, voted for a more traditional London studio setting. A compromise was struck, with the studio decorated with palm trees, plants, farmyard fencing and hay bales to kind of replicate the countryside, with a cardboard cow with mechanical udders installed. On the 20th of May 1973, the band and producer Eddie Offord entered Morgan Studios to begin 5 months of recording. For Wakeman, the boredom of the elongated sessions were alleviated when Black Sabbath arrived in the same studio to record their Sabbath Bloody Sabbath album and invited Wakeman to play on it. It's thought that Sabbath were responsible for graffitiing and ultimately breaking Yes's studio cow. It's this period that started to mark Wakeman's disillusionment with the band. On the day the final mix was completed, John Anderson and producer Eddie Offord left the studio with the treasured master tapes. Whilst trying to find their car keys, these tapes were placed on top of the car, only for the two to drive off without noticing. The tapes slid from the car roof into the path of an oncoming bus. Anderson claims he had to jump in front of this bus to stop it just before the tapes were ran over. Some may wish he hadn't have saved them. The eve of the album's release saw the band receive a wealth of accolades in the highly regarded Melody Maker Reader's Poll. The band must have felt elated, knowing that the album had already been certified gold status with 100,000 pre-orders alone. Ahead of Elton John, Bowie and ELP, it was Yes who proudly sat in the #1 position in the UK charts over the Christmas and New Year period. I often wonder how many families must have felt listening to this new record on a cold Boxing Day afternoon. Let's now unpack this festive fun and see what, if any, sense we can make of it. The initial mix of this track was 28 minutes long, and it was cut for its first release. The 2003 reissue, however, introduced the original crashing waves and synth intro. I feel that this was a masterstroke because it set a completely different tone for the whole track. It also strengthened the Hindu concepts of Shruti, that deals with God and the creation of the universe. In what is a real standout moment for the album, the opening vocal chant centres around 4 concepts: the dawn of light, the dawn of thought, the dawn of power, and the dawn of love. The opening lyrics overlap and intertwine like the Hindu ever-opening flower, with its endless caresses and everlasting life. The song plots mankind's evolution, emerging from God through sea, land and air, dancing from the ocean. It describes our reaching out for knowledge and love, which we sometimes lose, chasing it late into corners, and also laments mistakes that we make, and forgetting the wisdom we once knew so well. It's a real statement of intent.
As the links span our endless caresses for the freedom of life everlasting.
The Hindu Shruti themes echo in lines like, "I can't believe our song will leave you," and the idea that God's knowledge is passed on to the gurus. Whilst lines like, "We receive all we venture to give," reflect the idea of karma. The music is excellent throughout, and perhaps more than anywhere else on this album, there's a real balance and harmony between the instruments. Part of this song originated in the Fragile recording sessions in a song called All Fighters Past. Anderson wanted to create a calming sea of music with this piece, which employs a vast array of different instruments and is largely dominated by Wakeman's swirling keyboards and the rumbling undercurrent of Squire's bass. The music evokes images of oceans, rain, waves and turbulence, whilst the lyrics refer to rivers, sailing, seagulls and compasses. Ultimately, the listener sails beyond the topographic ocean and into the skies and distant suns.
We advance, we retrace our story.
The reference to the relayer is an Indian guru who passes on his divine knowledge to others. This echoes the Hindu concept of Smriti, which this side of the album is supposedly based around. When it was played live, Wakeman was afforded the opportunity to branch out with an extended mellotron and mini Moog solo. Some of the chord sections of this track were written by Alan White, which he strummed out on his guitar. This could have been the opening sections of the song because they share a similarity with White's later turn of the century track. Arguably the most surreal and challenging of all Yes music, the third movement of the album draws influence from the power and energy of the sun. It's here though that the album's links with Hindu philosophy become muddled. Anderson's album notes reference that this song tapped into distant cultures with Indian, Chinese and Central American influences. None of this really links though with the Hindu concept of Purana, which is more about mankind's links with one another and our ancestors. That's what this side of the album was supposed to be themed on. As it stands, it's the side 4 song lyrics that have more connection with this concept and how we all interconnect with each other and the universe, especially the Nous sommes du soleil part. Likewise, the tribal percussion presented on side 3 would have suited the tantric concepts of ritual, dance and ceremony. That's something the side 4 was supposed to be about. I feel on reflection, it's like Anderson either got these concepts and songs mixed up or swapped them intentionally. And with no one having a clue what the album is really about anyway, maybe no one noticed. The first half of the track includes a list of different words for various ancient sun gods, most of which Anderson manages to pronounce correctly.
Salty, Sun, Ilias, Netwate, Aken, Salulek, Tonachu, Orak, Dingrayan.
As much as I adore this track, I always feel about 2/3 of the way through the band kind of run out of ideas and decided to literally bolt on another acoustic track to escape a kind of spiralling mess. Shoehorned in at the end of side 3, Leaves of Green is perhaps robbed of being enjoyed more as a song in its own right. This section was originally played as an electric arrangement that kind of fitted the original song slightly better. As it stands, it's a beautiful, albeit slightly disjointed coda that was played live as a standalone piece for many years to come. As mentioned previously, this song would have been better suited to the Hindu concept of Puranas, the ancient, and the links to one's past. And as if to allude to the band's own history, about 4 minutes in, How Can Be Heard playing a few notes from Close to the Edge. Furthermore, throughout the track, How Can Be Heard replaying various themes from the album, especially as it crescendos towards the end. The original idea was that the final track would conclude by revisiting all these themes in a jazz style. When played live, the first part of this song features some wonderful bass phrasing by Chris Squire. However, it's arguably Alan White who is the star of this show, not only for this thunderous primal percussion climax, but also for the Hold Me My Love part that follows it. This precursor to the Nous sommes du soleil ending was originally written by White on piano. In many ways, I think he's the unsung writer of this album.
We love when we play, we hear a sound and all to our returning. We drift the shadows and course our way back home.
With the album still a month away from release, the tour began on the 16th of November in Bournemouth. The disillusioned Wakeman managed to play a mere 8 shows before announcing to the band that he was leaving. For what were mainly financial reasons, he was persuaded to stay on until the end of the tour. The set list remained pretty constant, with the whole of Close to the Edge being played, and then the whole of Topographic Oceans. But by February 1974, the Remembering had been dropped in favour of Starship Trooper. The band improved their stage design and lighting considerably for this tour, and recordings from the time reveal noticeable gasps of awe and exclamations from the crowd as the tracks open. Anderson would give an introduction to each of the movements, including at times a brief history of the Sanskrit language. As a curtain raiser, some US fans were treated to seeing a huge hot air balloon flying outside some of the venues. The infamous Wakeman curry was eaten at the Manchester Free Trade Hall. Apparently Wakeman was telling a roadie about wanting to go for a curry after the gig. The roadie in question apparently misheard Rick and assumed that he wanted one there and then on stage, and promptly returned with a chicken vindaloo, poppadoms and onion bhaji, which Rick promptly tucked into during the show. The curry itself probably came from the Rajut restaurant, which is only 2 minutes walk from this venue and still operates today and has done since the 1960s. The importance of Roger Dean to this band cannot be overstated, and although he solidified his importance with the epic Yes Songs art, it's here that he really comes of age. The use of colour, composition and content are astonishing, as Dean shows us what a topographic ocean could look like. It's a world of both the known and unknown, simultaneously real and surreal, solid historic rock and the twinkling heavens. One of the many reference sources for this incredible cover is a book called The View over Atlantis, which features illustrations of the many ancient stone circles, ley lines and earthworks that are found in the southwest of England. Specifically, Dean includes the following: the ancient stone circles of Avesbury and Stonehenge, various rock formations from Land's End, including Logan's Rock. From Yorkshire, we have the weird and wonderful Brimham rock formations. We have Mexico's ancient Chichen Itza temple. Below it, the Nazca Line monkey carving. The 5 fish are presumably the 5 members of the band. One of them is noticeably different from the other, more dormant and disinterested. It also matches the fossil on the rock, perhaps alluding that this fish was not destined to be around for much longer. The main UK music papers at the time were critical of this album on its release. Chris Welch in The Melody Maker referenced the album's brilliant moments, but also stated that it took a long time to get to them. Side 3 in particular comes in for some stick, with Welch referencing Howe's long, boring howling, and it also references Anderson's endless lyrics. Overall, it's an album which divides listeners, but then lots of Yes albums do this. In many ways, the album was always going to have problems due to the idea of 4 pieces of music having to fit onto 4 sides of vinyl, and I think this both restricts some parts and drags out others. Possibly a single album with a part 1 and a part 2 approach could have been more successful, something that could have allowed the musical themes to be more intertwined and developed more cohesively. Considering the band's original idea for interlocking pieces of music that played in different arrangements based on the audience reaction, they could have experimented with a multi-groove record that played a slightly different version of the music each time the needle was dropped. This supports Howe's idea at the time of having songs that had no end. The band themselves have all acknowledged both the album's brilliance and shortcomings, and not long after its release, Anderson was expressing a desire to re-record it in a different way. One of the album's best assessments comes from Rick Wakeman. Ever critical of the album, he said that it's a bit like a woman's padded bra, in that the cover looks good, but when you peel off the padding, there's not a lot there. Personally, while there's some moments on this album that I could do without, I've adored it for decades. There's a magic in it for me that I just don't hear in other Yes records, even if those other Yes records may actually be better. Topographic just has that special extra something. Perhaps this comes from its sheer scope of ambition, which is something that really could have only come from this glorious era in music. And incidentally, each one of the sides has at some point or other been my favourite one. I think anything that can claim to be both the band's greatest and worst album is surely worthy of a deeper look, and I hope I've done that here for you. Namaste.
You seekers of the truth, accepting that reasons will relive and breathe and hope and chase and love for you and you and you.